Rain tapped gently against the stained glass windows of the old Hart estate as we gathered in the library. Leather-bound books towered on walnut shelves, the scent of old paper and bitter coffee hanging in the air. I sat with my hands folded tightly in my lap. Across from me, my brother Nathan leaned back with practiced ease, one ankle resting on his knee, fingers wrapped around a glass of bourbon. The attorney, Mr. Langford, cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, Henry Hart passed 3 weeks ago. He left behind this final will and testament." My mother, Caroline, looked like she had aged a decade in the last month. Her pearls sat heavily against her neck. She stared at the floor, unmoving. Langford began reading. It was standard at first: donations to charity, specific items left to staff. Then the room fell silent. "To my son, Nathan Hart, I leave control of Hart Holdings and the estate. To my daughter, Evelyn Hart, I leave the journals and personal correspondence. She will know what to do." I blinked. "That's it?" I whispered. Nathan smirked. Guess he knew who could actually run things. My fingers clenched. The journals were heavy, handwritten, and filled with a man I barely knew. But somehow I felt the weight of something deeper, something unfinished. Late that night, I sat cross-legged on the floor of my childhood bedroom. Journals spread around me like a paper fortress. One was marked Volume 1. Inside, my father's sharp script filled every page. He wrote about business, about legacy. But then, hidden in the margins, a name: Isabel. Not my mother, not anyone I had ever heard of. The next page was a letter. To the daughter I never met. I froze. The words unraveled like a confession. A girl born in 1986. Her mother, Elise Richter. A summer affair that ended before it began. "I tried to reach out," he wrote, "but I was a coward. I buried the truth in ink and shame. I sat back. There was another heir, another truth, and no one else knew." At breakfast, Nathan read the paper like nothing had changed. "You're quiet," he said, without looking up. "Did you know about Isabel?" I asked. His paper lowered an inch. "Isabel who? Don't lie." He folded the paper carefully. "If Dad had a secret, it's not my problem. He gave me the company, remember?" "He gave me the truth," I said. Nathan stood, his jaw tight. "Then bury it like he did. That's what loyalty means." But I wasn't loyal to lies. I was done playing quiet. I traced Elise Richter to an old address in Boston. The building was small, brick, and surrounded by ivy. The woman who answered the door had graying hair and kind eyes that widened when I said my father's name. "I thought I'd never hear that again," she said, ushering me in. We drank tea while a clock ticked loudly in the background. "Isabel doesn't know," she said. "I kept her safe from disappointment." "She deserves to know who she is," Elise nodded slowly. "She's in Chicago now, an artist. Smart, guarded, be gentle." I promised I would. Back at the estate, I found my mother walking the grounds. The wind tugged at her shawl. "You knew about Isabel, didn't you?" She didn't blink. "He wasn't a faithful man. I chose to look away." "Why?" "Because survival in this house meant silence." I felt like the walls were shifting. "I can't be silent anymore," I said. She looked at me, truly looked. "Then be careful. This family devours truth-tellers." I booked a train to Chicago. It felt dramatic, cinematic, but also right. I watched the flat Midwest pass by, my fingers tracing the envelope with the letters and DNA test inside. Isabel Richter, my sister. What if she didn't want to know? What if she slammed the door? When I arrived, I found Isabel's studio tucked in a quiet street. The door opened after the second knock. She was younger, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, paint on her hands. "Yes?" she asked. "I think we might be related," I said. "I'm Evelyn Hart. Henry Hart was my father. Yours too." A beat. Then she stepped aside. Come in. Chicago in November had a kind of cold that settled into your bones. It wasn't just the temperature. It was the wind, the weight of the gray sky, the city's refusal to soften its edges. Evelyn pulled her coat tighter as she stepped off the train and out into the bustle of downtown. Her gloves were worn thin at the fingertips. She hadn't noticed until now. The studio was a few blocks away, tucked between a bookstore and a second-hand clothing shop, with mannequins that looked like they'd given up on life. Evelyn's boots clicked along the sidewalk as she walked. Her breath came out in short bursts of fog. She had written the letter to Isabel weeks ago. At first, she hadn't intended to send it. It had sat on her desk, weighted with a coffee mug, then folded inside a book. But she'd mailed it anyway, and Isabel had replied. A single line. If you're serious, come. Now here she was, standing in front of a faded blue door that bore a brass plaque, Isabel Richter, Fine Art Studio. Her hand hovered for a second before she knocked. Footsteps approached from inside, slow and cautious. The door opened. Isabel was shorter than Evelyn expected, dark-haired, pale-skinned, with a slight crease between her brows that made her seem perpetually skeptical. She wore paint-smeared jeans and a wool sweater with the sleeves pushed up. Her eyes were green, Henry's green, and they locked on to Evelyn with unnerving clarity. You made it, Isabel said. I did. They stood there, staring for a second too long. Then Isabel stepped aside. Come in. The studio smelled like oil paints and old paper. Light streamed in through tall windows, filtered by dust and the gray outside. Canvases lined the walls, some abstract, others portraits. The one facing the door was a woman with her back turned, walking into a field of fire. Evelyn swallowed hard. Isabel led her to a pair of mismatched armchairs. She moved with grace, but also with the tension of someone ready to bolt. Tea? She asked. Yes, please. As Isabel moved to the kitchenette in the corner, Evelyn took in the space. Books were stacked everywhere, in corners, on windowsills, even under an easel. The walls were plastered with notes, reference photos, torn magazine pages. One board was filled with single words: doubt, fracture, wound, belong, silence. She wondered how many of them were about Henry. So, Isabel said, returning with 2 mugs, we're really doing this. I guess we are. They sat. The tea was hot and bitter, which somehow felt appropriate. I wasn't sure you'd respond, Evelyn said. I wasn't sure I would either. Isabel took a sip. But then I thought, why not? Evelyn nodded. Why not? The silence stretched, not hostile, but heavy. Evelyn took a breath and reached into her bag. She pulled out a folder, worn at the edges, stuffed with copies of letters, photos, and one faded birth certificate. I brought what I found. You don't have to look at it, but it's yours. Isabel didn't take it. She stared at it like it might burn her fingers. What am I supposed to do with this? She asked, voice low. Whatever you want. Read it. Burn it. Throw it in the lake. I'm not here to force anything on you. I just thought you deserved to know. You think I don't know already? Isabel said sharply. I've known something was wrong my entire life. I just didn't know what, or who. My mother gave me fragments, half-lies, contradictions. She said my father was a teacher, that he died, that he ran away. Take your pick. Evelyn's throat tightened. I didn't know you existed until 3 months ago. Isabel looked away. Her jaw flexed. Do you hate him? She asked. I wish I could, Evelyn said. But mostly, I just feel tired. They fell quiet again. Outside, the wind howled between buildings. A man across the street shouted into his phone, then kept walking like nothing happened. Isabel stood suddenly. Come here. She walked over to a large canvas draped in linen and pulled the cloth away. The painting beneath was half finished. Two girls in a field, one standing, one sitting in tall grass. Their faces were blurred, but there was something unmistakable in their posture. They were sisters. "I started this before your letter came," Isabel said. "I didn't know who they were. I just knew they were looking for each other." Evelyn stepped closer. "It's beautiful. It's unfinished. So are we." They stood in front of it for a long time. Finally, Isabel turned back to the table. She picked up the folder Evelyn had brought, held it for a moment, then set it down beside her mug. "I'm not promising anything," she said. "I'm not asking you to. But if this is real, if we are who we think we are, then I want the truth. All of it." Evelyn nodded. "So do I." Isabel picked up her tea again, but this time she didn't drink. "What was he like?" she asked quietly. Evelyn smiled sadly. "Complicated. That's a cop-out." "Okay." She sat down again. "He was brilliant." We didn't say much after that. Not until I was already back at my hotel, the city humming outside the windows like a restless machine. I lay awake for hours, wondering what would come next. My phone buzzed just after midnight. A message from Isabel. "Still awake? I'm in if you are." I didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." The next morning, we met at a small clinic on the north side. It felt strange, clinical, cold, too modern for a secret that had lived so long in the shadows. She gave her sample first, then looked at me with that steady gaze of hers. "Do you think a test changes anything?" "No," I said, "but it might give us something solid. Something to hold when the rest tries to fall apart." We walked back in silence. Chicago was loud and gritty, but there was something comforting in its anonymity. "Come by the studio tomorrow," she said as we parted. "I want to show you something." The next day I found her crouched in front of a massive canvas half finished, thick with color and movement. "That's you," she said without looking up. I blinked. The painting was fierce. A woman standing in a burning field, her face shadowed but her stance unshaken. "You painted me in flames." She stood, wiping her hands on her jeans. "You came with the fire. That's how you feel to me. A spark that got tired of pretending to be ash." I didn't know what to say, so I just looked at her and felt something I hadn't in a long time, seen. "He didn't get to know either of us," she said. "But maybe we get to know each other. That's something." And it was. Back home, Hart Holdings was humming along without me. At least that's what Nathan wanted the world to believe. But I still held shares, influence, and now a truth that could shake the ground beneath his feet. I scheduled a meeting. When I entered the boardroom, the air changed. Nathan was already there, flanked by two executives with shark smiles. "Well, look who's returned," he said. "Let's cut the performance," I replied. "We need to talk. About Isabel." A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. "You want to bring an outsider into this family's business?" "She's not an outsider. She's blood. And I'm not asking. I'm informing." He leaned forward. "You don't have the leverage you think you do." I smiled. "Wait for the press release." That afternoon, Isabel and I sat side by side as we sent the story to a reputable business magazine. It was time. The article dropped 2 days later. "The Hidden Heir of Hart, Legacy, Lies, and a Woman's Return." It exploded. Shareholders called. Journalists swarmed. And Nathan? He finally understood the weight of truth. I received a message from him that night. "You've gone too far." I replied with a photo of our father's will. Annotated, dated, signed. Too far, numbered just far enough. My mother didn't speak to me for a week. When she finally did, her voice was quieter than I remembered. "You've lit a fire you can't put out." "Maybe it was already burning," I said. She touched the frame of a photo. My father, younger, confident. "You think you know him now?" "I think I know myself. And I won't let his shame shape me anymore." She nodded once. "Then be ready. This family has always punished women who speak too loudly." but I wasn't afraid of punishment anymore. The board tried to contain the chaos. Nathan suggested a compromise, a payout to Isabel. Silence money. I laughed when he told me. You think she'd sell her bloodline for a check? He shrugged. Everyone has a price. Not us, I said. Not this time. Later that night, Isabel and I drank wine on the roof of her building. They don't get to decide who we are, I told her. She raised her glass. To blood and fire, and sisters who burn louder than secrets. The DNA results arrived in a white envelope. Positive, 99.98% match. I stared at the words for a long time before sliding the paper across the table to Isabel. Told you, she said with a crooked smile. I never doubted it. Maybe I did, she admitted. Not anymore. We stood at the edge of the lake behind my father's house, the one from her painting. She had never been here before, but somehow she had painted it perfectly. You want it? I asked. The estate, the legacy, the mess? She looked out at the water. Let's build something new, from the ashes. We held the press conference on a Thursday. I stood at the podium, Isabel beside me, and told the truth. About our father, about the will, about the fire that tried to be hidden for decades. Nathan resigned 3 days later. The company would survive, but it would be different now. Ours. Afterward, we walked through the halls of the estate one last time. Do you want to keep it? I asked. She shook her head. Let it go. So we did. We sold it. Donated part of the profit. Used the rest to open an art foundation in Elise's name. Not a monument to Henry, but to the women who survived him. To the daughters who made something better. From the wreckage, from the truth, from each other. I found it by accident. Tucked between the pages of a leather-bound journal I'd thrown into a box years ago. One of the few things I hadn't burned, donated, or boxed away in fury after my father's funeral. The pages were stiff with time, but the letter was unmistakable. Folded twice, cream-colored, a red wax seal, faded but intact. His initials, HHI, stared at it for a long moment. My heart thudded like a warning, or maybe a dare. Then I broke the seal. Evelyn, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And you've come looking for something I never gave you. The handwriting was unmistakable. Bold, slanted slightly to the right, impatient even in ink. I know you wanted the truth, and I know I made you work too hard to get it. You were always the one watching from the edges, understanding more than you let on. I built a kingdom and failed to see the Empress standing in the next room. I blinked. You were always better than I knew how to be. I watched you sacrifice, endure, protect. And I gave you silence. I'm sorry for that. I didn't know how to love without control. Didn't know how to trust love that didn't bow to me. The words blurred. I pressed my fingers to my lips. You deserved more than power. You deserved peace. I hope this letter brings you closer to it. There was no signature, just my name again, scrawled on the bottom like a whisper. Evelyn. It didn't erase the years. It didn't absolve the betrayal, but it gave me something I never expected from him. A goodbye. I hadn't planned on going back. Not to the house, not to the town where everyone still whispered my name like it came with a curse. But something pulled me there. Maybe it was the letter, or maybe the part of me that still needed to see the wreckage with my own eyes. The gates creaked as I pushed them open. We never fixed the hinges, even when we had the money. Some things were always meant to sound like ghosts. The house was colder than I remembered. Not in temperature, but in energy. The warmth my mother once fought to fill it with had long since burned out. I walked the hall slowly, fingertips brushing the wallpaper I used to trace as a girl. The hallway still smelled faintly of old books and floor polish. I paused outside my father's office. It was exactly as he'd left it, imposing, meticulous. Except now, it didn't intimidate me. I sat behind his desk, the leather cold beneath my palms. "I'm not you," I whispered, "and thank God for that." But I wasn't here for nostalgia. I was here for closure. I opened the bottom drawer and took out the final ledger, the one he never wanted anyone to see, the one Isabel had only half believed existed. Inside was proof: misallocated funds, offshore accounts, blackmail payoffs tied to board members, names, dates, numbers, enough to burn Hart Holdings to the ground, or to clean it properly for the first time in its history. I never believed in poetic justice, but the board meeting that morning came pretty close. I arrived early, wore black, not mourning, but armor. The kind of black that says, "I see what you did, and I'm still standing." They filed in one by one. Some wouldn't meet my eyes. Others tried to smile, that tight, brittle kind of smile men use when they're afraid of losing power. Nathan wasn't among them, not anymore. I placed the ledger on the center of the table. Didn't speak right away. I let the silence stretch, let it become unbearable. "This," I finally said, tapping the book, "is everything my father never wanted the world to know." No one moved. Every shell company, every deal that crossed the line, every name who played along. A man at the end of the table, Whitmore, I think, cleared his throat. "I'm not suggesting anything," I cut in. "I'm stating it plainly. We rebuild this company from the bones, or I take it to the press." Another silence, this one heavier. "Your father would never have allowed this," someone muttered. I met his gaze. "My father is dead, and his way died with him." I stood. "You have 1 week to come clean, to vote on a full audit, to prove that Hart Holdings isn't just a name held together by rot and fear." I left them staring after me. Let them stew, let them sweat. I wasn't here to be liked. I was here to end the legacy that tried to bury me and build something stronger in its place. 1 month later, I stood on the rooftop of the new foundation building. Isabel was beside me, dressed in a linen suit splattered with paint, her hair wild in the wind. She hated public speaking, but she came anyway, for me. Below us, the city buzzed, unaware that 2 daughters had just rewritten a legacy. We had done it. The audit passed. The board was cleaned out. The worst had been exposed. The company survived. Leaner, louder, more transparent. And Hart wasn't just a name carved into a door anymore. It was something we defined. We opened the Elise Hart Foundation that morning. For artists, for women, for truth-tellers who'd been silenced. I spoke first. Not from a podium, but standing among them, those who mattered. Survivors, dreamers, fighters, daughters. "I used to think legacy was what we inherited," I said. "But now I know it's what we choose to carry forward, and what we choose to leave behind." The applause didn't matter. The cameras didn't matter. Isabel leaned in. "You're shaking." "I'm not scared," I whispered. "Just alive." That night, I lit a match and burned the last copy of my father's letter. Not in anger, but in peace, because I didn't need his words anymore. I had my own, and they were rising, clear and strong, from the ashes he left behind.